Good morning and welcome to Northern Lights Center for Spiritual Living. My name is Reverend Vaughn Amari and I'm pleased to be here with all of you and folks that are out in Zoom and in the virtual field. Northern Lights Center for Spiritual Living is a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. And Northern Lights Center for Spiritual Living offers practical and spiritual tools to make what? Positive changes in our lives. And our promise here to reveal, inspire, uplift, celebrate, and magnify your greatness. We acknowledge our presence here on the traditional and unceded lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and Coastal Salish peoples. These people are still here, and we join with them in how they continue to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. We seek to resist the erasure of Indigenous histories as we work towards honoring and inviting to truth. In a similar fashion, we acknowledge that so much of what we know in this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horrors of transatlantic trafficking, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. We also explicitly name the Asian and Chicano people who toiled with little recognition. We are indebted to all of their labors and their sacrifices, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence upon them throughout the generations and the resulting impacts that can still be felt and witnessed today. Please join me for our opening song in this very room by Ron and Carol Harris. In this very room, there's quite enough love for all the world. And in this very room, there's quite enough joy for all the world. And there's quite enough peace and quite enough power to walk through our every fear. For Spirit, sweet Spirit, is in this very room. In this very room. Good morning, and welcome to Northern Lights Center for Spiritual Living. And this is the time that we set aside each Sunday to ground ourselves, to allow ourselves to be centered wherever we are, to be present in the now. Knowing that in this very moment we are right here, right now. And so I'm going to invite us to take like 3 nice, deep cleansing breaths, bringing it in, and then audibly you can release it. Let's take a nice deep breath in, and release. Deep breath in, and release. And one more nice deep breath in, and release. Now, how does that feel? How does your body feel? How does your mind feel? Just focusing
right where you are. Nothing before this moment, nothing after this moment. Allowing yourself to be free from everything before and after. And to be present. If you're sitting in a chair, if you're standing, wherever you are, just recognize exactly where you are. What do you feel around you? What do you sense? Is there smells? Is there sounds? What do you feel inside? Do you feel calm? Do you feel peace? Just invite us to, for a few moments, just to check each of those things out. The sounds, the smells, the feelings, right where you're at. If a question comes up, ask the divine. Which is doing that, allowing yourself to be in the perfect present now. The sounds. What are the smells? What do you feel within? Just remember, you can do this any time of the day. When you get anxious, nervous, things are overwhelming us. Just stop. Take a couple nice deep breaths in and listen to the sounds around you. Yourself to be present in that moment so that you can relax and be at ease and at peace. This is possible anytime. And so I just invite us now to slowly, surely come back to the room. Move our fingers and toes if we need to. When you're ready, open your eyes. We'll do our declaration. We'll go through it 3 times, and we're gonna say it with feeling, with that, that oomph, So here we go.
We are an expanding and loving community working in a field of infinite potential.
Razz it up.
We are an expanding and loving community working in a field of infinite potential.
And really razz it up.
We are an expanding and loving community working in a field of infinite potential.
And so it is. And now, this is something, I don't know if I've ever done this, but the reading today comes from my iPhone. I usually have to have it bigger, but this is a short one, so I'm able to handle this one. And it's called Being Here. Transcending down into the ground of things is akin to sweeping the leaves that cover the path. There will always be more leaves, and the heart of the journey, the heart of our awakening, is to discover for ourselves that the leaves are not the ground, and the sweeping them aside will reveal a path. And finally, that to fully live, we must take the path and keep sweeping it. And that's by Mark Nepo from the Way Under the Way. And so it is.
So it is.
See, told you it was short. Uh-oh. Where do we go?
So we have the monthly chant. Well, I've never done this before. No, I've never seen this before. I've never hoped this. I've never been this before. But now it is possible. Now I can try. My life makes it possible. My reason why. I'm so much more than what can ever be known. Well, I've never done this before. No, I've never seen this before. I've never hoped this. I've never been this before. But now it is possible. Now I can try. My life makes it possible. My reason why. I'm so much more than what can ever be known. Well, you've never done this before. No, you've never seen this before. You've never hoped this. You've never been this before. But now it is possible. Now you can try. Your life makes it possible, your reason why. You're so much more than what can ever be known. Well, we've never done this before. No, we've never seen this before. We've never hoped this. We've never been this before. But now it is possible, now we can try. Our life is possible, our reason why. We're so much more than what can ever be known. Well, I've never done this before. No, I've never seen this before. I've never hoped this. I've never been this before. But now it is possible, now I can try. My life makes it possible, my reason why. I'm so much more than what can ever be known.
Quick song.
So I wanted that moment of Hosanna, Hazana, Zana, Zana, Hazana, Hazana, Hosanna. I wanted it because today on the calendar, it is Palm Sunday. And you're like, why do you care about Palm Sunday? Well, Palm Sunday is kind of a big deal for me as a kid. And I don't know, I don't think there's anybody else here that was raised Catholic except Stephanie. And for Catholics, Palm Sunday was like this amazing amalgam. It was so different from normal services. It was just outside of the box. Because when you'd come into church, people would hand you these little palms, these little pieces from a palm tree. And then, you know, and people would be waving them, and people would be hitting each other with them, and, you know, it was completely fine. It was, you know, it was kind of like a time where people could play. And then you'd get into the whole service, and then there'd be this enactment. Again, when I was growing up, when there was a reading, someone would get up and read, and then there'd be another reading, and then there'd be another reading, there'd be all this reading, and in the Catholic faith tradition, there are these set pieces where people say, and the Lord is with you, and also with you. And there's just these set pieces that are very, you know, once you've heard it about 6 times, you have it memorized. And you can automatically know, now's the time to sit, now's the time to stand, now's the time to kneel, now's the time to get up from kneeling, to standing, to kneeling, to standing, to... There's all of these things. And Palm Sunday was a completely different day. It was a completely new day. And my talk today is focusing on 3 things. It's focusing on new, now, and next. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be interweaving those concepts of new, now, and next with the Palm Sunday story, because there are elements of the Palm Sunday story that I think can become useful for us in terms of our daily practices. So one of the things that I want to talk about in terms of that newness with that Palm Sunday is there was a dialogue. You would actually, in the booklet, there was a chant where the whole congregation was speaking, and it wasn't the normal, and also with you. Amen. Alleluia. It was not that those one word or those phrase responses. We were reading whole sentences. We were reading whole paragraphs. And it was this, after this opening, and typically I was also an altar boy. And it was one of the days when we definitely had incense. So we had to prepare for having the incense, because the incense device was kept in a special locker. And there was a special set of charcoals that you would use, and you'd have to figure out how to light it just right, because if you didn't get it lit, the priest would be really not happy with you. And so you'd have to get it really right about lighting it and making sure that it was lit. It's very much like lighting the charcoal for the grill, because it's that round thing. You just have to get everything around it, and then the priest sprinkles this stuff on top of this charcoal that produces the fragrance. And then the little thing is shifted, and again, all of this was kind of a big deal. It was something different. So what are the new things that we encounter in our lives? What are the new things that we're called to respond to? I mean, I have to say, one of the things that's pretty new is we are in a time where we have a presidential candidate who is indicted 91 times. And it's new in the United States. I mean, there are previous times, if there was so much of a hint of anything unsavory, let's say. Unsavory, an affair. Unsavory, paying people money for things that they probably shouldn't have been paid for. Unsavory, like cheating on income tax. Those would have cut somebody out. But not anymore. Now we're in a time where it's kind of celebrated. Where the candidate's saying, I'm of appeal because I'm a persecuted being. And everybody who's persecuted can relate to me. It's new. I've never seen anything remotely like this in our country. I mean, there are other countries that have some renown for having folks in charge who aren't very good folks. For months, there's been nothing but old news about how old President Biden is. And that, you know, we're basically given this choice. Do we have this old, tired person who can't get up in the morning? Or do we have a criminal? It's a new kind of question. It's a new kind of thing. And we have this new thing with a Congress that's vowed to do nothing. We have this terrible crisis, we've been told. We have this terrible crisis at our border. Drugs are coming in and it's killing people. And we've got to do something about it. We've got to do something about it. And when they come up with a plan to do something about it, the criminal encourages not to do anything about it, because it will look better for a political campaign. Again, in my mind, it's something new. And I give this story because that's kind of the context within the country. But what are the new things that we are individually facing? What are the new circumstances that we have to try to take on? How easy is it to welcome those new things? How attached to the old ways are we? One of the notions about something new is I'd like to consider the shift from merely surviving to thriving. We can spend so much energy just trying to figure out how we can get through the next day or the next hour or the next minutes. But what happens when we turn that around to the notion that we have the capacity to thrive? And where do we find ourselves with that capacity to thrive? What if thriving is both our external circumstances and our internal expectations? That we can see prospects in the midst of difficulties, that we can see possibilities. Michael and I took a program called the Forum. And in the Forum, the proposal was that we spend a lot of time and energy trying to solve and get rid of our problems. And the Forum proposed the radical notion of have a problem that is worthy of your life. Have a problem that is worthy of your life and energy. Emerson described an experience of divine discontent. That divine discontent can both push inward commitment and outward action. One of the places where I find a tremendous amount of divine discontent is around working in the Seattle School District. The Seattle School District is very, it's got some great press. It loves the notion that we are working to ensure that those furthest from educational justice are being delivered educational services. And I mean, that sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, those furthest from educational justice are being delivered educational services. And when push comes to shove, and you actually try to do that, the way that you do that is you say, well, we're going to put that black boy in a self-contained special ed class. And what happens in that special education self-contained class? How much progress do we get to see that black boy make? Typically what happens is that the brakes are so hard on any progress forward. I've definitely seen that a first grade goal to get to reading in 3 years doesn't advance that far. I've seen kids have the same goal year after year after year. And I'm in a system that's like not asking, well, why is it that this goal is the same goal? It doesn't look like you're making any progress if it's the same goal. So what are the places of divine discontent? What are the new things pressing on us? What are the things that are calling for our attention, our demand? In that scene from Jesus Christ Superstar, if you looked at the background, if you look at the folks, they're pretty happy. They're pretty gung-ho. And what I want to talk about with that and the intersection with the new, now, and next is that how we look at that story of Jesus coming into Jerusalem, all victorious and all gung-ho, as an individual story of ourselves. Where do we come into situations where we are celebrated? Where do we come into situations where people are hosannaing us? And you know that hosanna is around saving. One of the things that I was kvetching at Michael the other day is that they had a story to share about this woman who dreamed of helping people. And so this white woman was dreaming of helping people. And so when her children were raised, because her dream couldn't be met when she was a young woman, when her dream was met and she was a woman in her 50s, she went to Africa, where she could save the people in Africa. And I was all bent out of shape around this story, because I'm like, I'm so sick of these white savior stories. Somehow Africa, which is the source of all frickin' civilization, which is the foundation of humanity, somehow it needs white people to fix it. And historically, the fact is that white people have gone into Africa and effed it up. They haven't been a solution, they've been a mess up. So I go, thank you so much for coming to Africa, for making it all better. White people are like, hey, we're the demand, we're the market for you to put people into slavery. And when that gets cut off, we're gonna make it our own market. We're gonna have it be that race didn't matter before, but now we're gonna make it that in the United States, if you look black, you were probably a slave, so that should continue for all time. So the notion of saving has taken on this kind of this overtone, I would say, of well, that we are better than you. That we are the fixes. And what I'm proposing is, how do we turn that around and see ourselves as saviors in our own lives rather than fixing other people's lives? How do we find out that the wrong that's happening in our life, that we can be our own frickin' savior, and that we have to stop looking to everybody else to try to fix things? there's a notion in New Thought teachings that we have to learn how to just get quiet. I think in the olden days, it was easier. You know, like in the story of Jesus getting into Jerusalem, he had to walk a lot of the way there. I mean, even for us, to drive from West Seattle to Burien, it's about three miles. It's about 5 miles.
2.5. Actually, it's less.
So, in the olden days, to walk that 5 miles would take the better part of an hour and a half. You know, that's not going at a fast clip. I mean, you could do Green Lake. You can do the 3 miles around Green Lake in an hour, and you're not really hoofing it particularly hard. You can go around Seward Park without having to be jogging it. I had been jogging it until my diabetes came back, and then I had to be carrying so much stuff in my backpack to navigate high and low blood sugars that I just couldn't keep doing that, because, you know, I'd be calling Michael 2 miles out. I'm like, I'm out of all my food, and my blood sugar is 60 and dropping. Can you come and get me? We get to be our own Hosanna. Where can we Hosanna ourselves? Hosanna, Hazana, Zana, Zana. This notion of passing, surviving, and thriving. We live in a world that is constantly engaged in cooperation. Michael has filled the room here with plants. Plants are automatically absorbing the carbon dioxide that animals let go into the atmosphere, and the plants are exchanging it for oxygen. Some kinds of plants are generating pollen. And Michael's coughing at my identifying the pollen. And bees are one little creature that takes the pollen from the plants and cross-pollinates, which is a much healthier thing. And then there are these fruits that come from the trees. Fruits that feed the birds and the plants, or feed the animals and the birds. And there's this interaction and intersection between all of this. And somehow human beings thought that we don't have to be connected with this. We have to be above all of this. We've gotten so fixated on being in charge. We've gotten so fixated on making everything a certain way that we don't let the models of nature show us how to live. Show us how to move in a more cooperative, connected way. So the new way of being is to lean into that notion of thriving. Ernest Holmes and Raymond Charles Barker said, "I keep the windows of my soul open to new and fresh ways of knowing truth. I let go of the little to accept the more." I'm going to say that again because I really like it. I keep the windows of my soul open to new and fresh ways of knowing the truth. I let go of the little to accept the more. Perhaps you'll see that on one of the affirmations this week. So that's the new. Now what's the now? The now is, who are we? And what will we do? If we're situating ourselves and centering ourselves in thriving, we can release the old ideas of selfishness. We can release the old ideas of not enoughness. And we can identify with wholeness, with love, with abundance. And again, I was kvetching at Michael. The word that the speaker said was givingness. The givingness. And I'm like, I really get frustrated because we have some really great words like abundance. We have abundance, we have generosity. But some of my colleagues in this movement love to take other words like giving and turn it into givingness. And it's just not very literate. That God's givingness. So I'm not giving the givingness. I'm not going with the givingness. I'm going with the notion of abundance. I'm going with the notion of prosperous. That those characteristics, those qualities that we assign to the divine, those are the best in ourselves. Sometimes the only way that we can get to the best in ourselves is by imagining it outside of ourselves, because we're so fixated on what's not enough in ourselves. Do you ever get up thinking about the not enough in our lives? Does that ever happen to you? The notion of something bigger than us can let us move our thoughts and let us move our feelings beyond the places where we feel trapped and small. Those now moments that feel like they're compressing us, and they let us break out of that. They let us push back against that. Who we are and how we are and what we will do, there's a movement. There's a movement from getting, I really gotta get this, to having, which is what I've got it, I get to keep it, and I have it, and it's mine. If you've ever seen the movie Finding Nemo, there are these seagulls that are just like mine, and the mine is Nemo. They think they've caught Nemo, and they're very fixated on Nemo as being the object of their possession. Mine. The shift can be from getting to having to being. With being, we've stopped holding on so tightly. I think many of you have heard me before about the monkey trap. The monkey puts its little paw in the cage and it grabs the banana, but the hand is too big to get back out of the cage. So the monkey just cannot imagine letting go of the banana, and it's stuck in that box. How often are we holding on to something that has us stuck in a box, like the monkey trap? With being, we're able to open our hand and let go. There isn't a lot of good press about letting go. The notion of letting go, the notion of surrendering, at least historically, is surrendering means I've lost. But the spiritual notion is that I'm able to move. I'm able to move on from where I am. In the story of Palm Sunday, Jesus arrives on a donkey. And it's like, well, what's the significance of a donkey? Well, metaphysically, spiritually, a donkey is a kind of persistent creature. going to do what it's going to do. It's known as being stubborn. And we can be very stubborn in what we're going to let go of. But Jesus riding on the donkey is that Jesus is taking control of that stubborn beast. That he is not being stuck. That he's encouraging the donkey to go forward.
He's a colt.
Donkey or colt?
It was following mother.
Well, I'm just presenting the notion for consideration. So if we think about that surrendering, if we think about going with the flow, there's a quote from Will Rogers: even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit on it. So Jesus taking the colt or the donkey, whatever you want to call it, into Jerusalem set a difference from what was happening. That was the east side of town. On the west side of town, Pontius Pilate was coming into town. Pontius Pilate was the governor. And Pontius Pilate was surrounded by soldiers, surrounded by riches. And it's a contrast. It's a contrast that was never pointed out to me when I was at church holding those palms. We eventually got to Pontius Pilate. One of the narrators got to be Pontius Pilate. Who is this man that you want to crucify? Jesus! What do you want to do with him? Crucify him! Crucify him! Pontius Pilate got to kind of say all the setups for the nasty parts of the narrative. And the thing about those nasty parts of the narrative is we have our own little internal selves which are very happy to say, what am I going to do? Crucify you! Crucify you! Don't you have a little inner voice that's very happy to set you up and say, down with you! Down with you! Are we going to free the murderer or are we going to free you? I'll let the other person go. I'm way worse than that. You don't know how bad I am. We have this internal little voice that is always judging, that is always deciding not enough. So in terms of the now, be in a place to ask the inner wisdom, what is mine to do? And then allow the silence to fill us up with what is ours to do. And then the next. We've all heard the Zen expression, I believe, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The tasks of our lives never really dramatically change all that much. Did you need to eat this morning? In all likelihood, you're going to need to eat tonight. You may even need to eat before tonight. You may need to eat this afternoon. Our tasks don't change, but our thoughts and our feelings about our tasks can change. And it's the shift, it's the transformation of those thoughts and feelings that empowers us to activate and to go to that next place. In the story of Jesus, what happened in Jerusalem, it wasn't all good times. It wasn't all fun and celebration. The notion was that Jesus was heading into Jerusalem for Passover. Passover was a celebration of a tradition, a history, a looking at how the divine had stepped in to make an impossible situation transform. You know, and in the story of Genesis, God hits Egypt with Not one plague, not two, it's 9. And they're not 9 simple, happy things. You know, it ends with the death of the firstborn son if you didn't put the blood on the doorposts. Anybody that missed out on putting the blood on the doorposts, the angel of death was perfectly happy to zap them. God was not a gentle, loving God in those stories. And sometimes we have a not gentle, loving God in ourselves. Do we ever think about people and like imagine the worst possible thing for them? Is that something that ever gnaws at our consciousness? We have the opportunity to choose to be wisdom, to choose to be love, to choose to be abundance. And in that choice, we change. And the next is that we take on a new way of being. We embrace new possibilities. Yeah, so Jesus is weak in Jerusalem. What does he do? He heads to the temple and he's not like, oh, you guys are doing it all great here. I love what you've done to the place. I've loved how you've turned this into a marketplace. Because that's exactly what worship should be. It should be a marketplace. You know, if you said 9 to 5, you're going to get this bottle of holy water. And this holy water has been blessed by the Lord himself. And this holy water, if you bathe in this holy water, you will be healed. Said $9.95 a month, said $9.95 a day, and you will be healed so much more. Jesus went in and turned over the tables. That was one of the things that I loved in the story of Jesus. Jesus got pissed off. You know, because I was always sold, told and sold on the notion of Jesus was always gentle and kind. Jesus was not always gentle and kind. Jesus went in and he said, "Stop it!" You know, there's the Bob Newhart episode where the woman is, "I don't know how to make it go away. Stop it. Just stop it." Jesus doesn't make friends with everybody. People are like, get him out of here. Get rid of him. Jesus is even his closest friends. Jesus is like, you're not always going to hang with me. We're not even our own best friends. I mean, the whole notion of that story of Jesus' betrayal by all those people, it's also the story of ourselves. How often do we betray ourselves? It's easy in the story to have betrayers who are like, oh, that Peter, he's not constant. He's such an annoying character. Judas, Judas, he's particularly annoying. It's really hard to hold the mirror up and say, how am I Peter? How am I Judas? Really, I mean, the only decent characters in the story are like Mary Magdalene and Mary. They're the only ones that are like steadfast. And nobody ever comments on the fact that, you notice it's the women who are like consistent? You know, Christianity doesn't do a great job of lifting up women. It's like, know your place. I mean, we had that whole thing with the person in her kitchen talking about how scary the world is.
Oh.
And if I had worn a green shirt today, I'd be making more of a connection. Do all the things, the bad things that happen. We've been in traditions where women have been minimized. And yet let's throw out how we minimize ourselves. But let's recognize that process. How do we turn ourselves down? How do we turn ourselves away? Ernest Holmes said, an activity of mind and spirit is surging forward with tremendous power. The seed that grows in the wall's crevice has the power to burst the wall. and activity of mind and spirit is surging forward with tremendous power. The seed that grows in the wall's crevice has the power to burst the wall. What are the seeds that have the power to burst our imprisonment, to burst our enslavement, to burst all of the ways that we have taken on burdens, that we have said no to being more, no to being our fullest selves, no to being the wisdom, the light, the abundance. We're all very good at saying no. But the next is, we can catch ourselves. And we can say, I can overcome this and say yes next time. So please join me in our affirmation. Grounded in truth, I step forward into ever greater good. Grounded in truth, I step forward into ever greater good. And finally, grounded in truth, I step forward into ever greater good. And so it is. And I think Michael is going to shut off the camera, and then I can do a closing song.